I like Tucker's setup.
All right. Is that working for you?
Yep.
Yep.
Go full screen though.
Cool. Got it?
You got it.
All right, here we go. Hey, Adi. How are you?
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you. So, yeah, you're right, Josh. So many old friends showing up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nice.
well, thanks for everyone who joined. Just a quick bit about myself. For the last a decade or so, most of my work has been actually doing something different than what I've been doing today, kind of designing interactive spaces. I worked at Second Story. We did all sorts of, spaces like immersive art installations, like you saw there, to like flagship retail, experiential marketing, things like this. And in 2020, life got weird as it did for many people, and I found myself at a place called Magic Leap, which of course makes these wearable augmented reality glasses, which might seem like a bit of a weird jump at first, but if you think about it, there is a through line here. In my old life, I was making interactive spaces, and in my new life, I was making interactive spaces. The difference here is that instead of the technology being embedded into the built environment around us, you're wearing it on your head. So found myself doing a different kind of interactive space, though, this more geared around utility and kind of practical use cases. So this is actually the first project I did at Magic Leap. It's called Wildfire. Here we're actually piloting it with some real California wildland firefighters. And so the idea here was that, what becomes possible when a group of people can stand around data, like native data, spatial data, instead of just looking at representations of data on screens, we're all kind of seeing a collected view of an event unfolding. So this could be like live response or sort of training in advance of an incident. So after that project, it really became clear to me that, like, wow, this as a tool, not just as an experience canvas, but as a tool to do our work, is really powerful. And I started to think about my old life back at Second Story, and I said, wow, if I had a tool like this back then, it probably would have changed everything about how we went about doing our work. And I started to think a lot about the last major project that I worked on at Second Story, the Australian Centre of the Moving Image in Melbourne, Australia, which was a 1,600 square meter museum redesign. It was an epic project. It took many years and a lot of trips to Australia. And I thought a lot about, man, on this project, I could see these moments where things would have been different if we had had this tool. I thought a lot about all of the challenges we faced, and there were many, and what we had to do to overcome them. Like, for example, how do you fit all these ideas? We had all these ideas of exhibits and experiences. How do we fit this into the space while maintaining some sort of seamless flow? And it took a lot of work, countless iterations, countless stakeholder reviews to get here. I thought a lot about, the challenges of helping people suss out these qualitative aspects of how a spatial design will feel when you're looking at representations of 3D on 2D screens. So like, we have this little nook. Is it going to be too big? Is it going to feel too tight in here? It's hard to tell. And most importantly, you inevitably come up with these really bold, audacious ideas along the way. And the hardest part is getting everyone to believe that this is possible. And not only is it possible, but it's actually a good idea. It's actually a really compelling idea. This is probably my favorite installation at the museum. It's called Memory Garden. And basically how it works is you walk up to it and you put your hands under these little pillars, and a beam of light shines on your hand, and it projects these beautiful little home movies from their film archive onto the palm of your hand. So it's like this precious little moment where you're holding these ephemeral, like fleeting memories. And of course, that took a lot of work, a lot of prototyping. Here's just one shot of Matt in the lab, and it's making something real that people can engage with, so that they can see, oh yeah, like we see it in our mind's eye, but now you, the client, can see it, and that of course takes time and it can be expensive. Another example, if you see that glass casework in the back right over there, like if we had had a Magic Leap 2 on this project, we would have been able to design that casework in the actual space at the actual scale. So think about the difference of, us looking at this on a 2D screen and manipulating 3D objects, but being there in the shell of the museum and kind of moving things around. It's like, oh, it kind of feels nice here, but oh, you don't like it there? Let's try it over here. Let's try it at a different scale. And so there's this iteration. There's this embodied sense, designing in 3D that you just can't achieve in 2D. And so I thought, wow, how would that have changed our ability to not only come up with great ideas, better iterations of these ideas, but this rapid iteration of trying it out as you're having these ideas and designing. Most importantly, we've been able to do this together. So a big project like this, I mean, we all know it takes tons of people to pull this off, and all these people have to find a way to collaborate together. But when we're collaborating, we're often doing so on our own individual glowing rectangles. And now it may be a shared document, but we're still kind of like separated. It's not true collaboration. So imagine being able to iterate together in space around a virtual prototype, where we can all stand around it and truly be together in the space. And think about what that enables in terms of this like collective intelligence that we're all trying to unlock when we build creative teams. And then you think about it, what does this mean for how you engage your clients? Doing immersive presentations. So now, and I think a lot of us that work in any sort of creative discipline, I think we tend to take this for granted. The fact that we have really good imaginations and we can see it in our mind's eye exactly as we want it to be. But the challenge is getting our clients to see it too and getting them to believe. And so this is kind of like taking the idea out of your head, putting it into space, inviting your clients to all stand around it and talk about it. Now all of a sudden they're not passive, recipients of, they're actively engaged and they can see what you see. And I think that changes everything. So, all these insights kind of made us think, we should really build a tool that would enable a lot of these situations. And so we started working on it. We did. It's called Magic Leap Workshop, and we'll talk you through what you can do with that a little bit later today. But first, I just want to level set because, it's often, different people have different ideas about, what technology are we talking about here and what are the differences. So really quickly, just acknowledge the spectrum of XR. On the left, I think pretty much everyone understands VR at this point. It's kind of like you have a digital blindfold on to the real world, but you're fully immersed in a digital world. And then in the middle, of course, Apple Vision Pro, which is not really AR. It's actually something called pass-through VR, where your experience of the world is mediated by a video screen. So you're being shown a video of what's on the outside, and people are being shown a video of course, your eyes. And then on the right, you have see-through AR, like true AR. And this is where Magic Leap plays. And this is all about, clear lenses, like glasses, that give you a direct view into the world, so you can engage with people just like you would in normal everyday life. And so, it's not that each of these devices is good for different things. And so it's not like one's better than the other, but for certain use cases, like doing a design walkthrough on site, you kind of need full visibility because you need that mobility. And so I don't want to be looking at a screen. I want to see the real world and the real people around me. This of course is possible with our device because of the lenses and the crazy technology that I won't even begin to try to explain of how it does this, but it does, and it's pretty amazing. But also the form factor, where you can see the full person's face. So something like 90% of communication is nonverbal. And think about that for a minute. So being able to see your colleagues or your clients' faces when you're working through an idea, that, subtle, you can read the facial expressions. That may be all the feedback you need. And some of those other devices, the size of it just obscures the face too much. But all of this, I think, points to something much more significant for anyone doing any sort of spatial design, and it's that for so long we have been designing representations of 3D things on 2D screens, and what we're entering into now is this era where, and it's in the early phases of what I would call a paradigm shift. And this shift is from glowing rectangles, 2D screens, to spatial computing. And it's a big deal. The biggest paradigm shift everyone's talking about right now, of course, is AI. But I think there's a lot of big changes in the world happening right now. And I think this is one of the big ones. And there are, I think, a few reasons why. The first is, if you think about how we've traditionally interacted with computers to date, the inputs, it's been very limiting, right? If it's a mouse or if it's a stylus, it's like scroll, tap, click. That does not make use of the dynamic nature of our human bodies. And when you think about what you can do in spatial AR, it's more intuitive. So instead of scrolling and tapping and clicking, there's a picture of hands molding clay. It's like this, any sort of infinite options. It's bump, nudge, throw. Anything can be an interactive input. And that's just a more natural way to interact with computers. Here's a video, hopefully this plays. Just a quick capture. This is a real dodecahedron and a virtual dodecahedron. And this is early, but it just kind of shows you the nature of the goal here is to make it as much like interacting with real objects as possible. And when this is a basic example, but then you begin to think about what it would mean when you add physics or edge collision, and you have this kind of immediate feedback. Now all of a sudden, the difference between a virtual object and a real object, the line starts to blur a bit. The second point here is, just think about how aware our 2D screens are of us in our context. And, probably the exception to this example would, of course, be our phones, which, with GPS, it's great. I don't know what I would do without it, but it knows where I am and it can help me get to where I want to go. But there's this level of awareness that in many ways, I kind of think about AR as like a display layer for the AI thing that's happening. And this is going to change things in a big way. And what a lot of folks don't understand is, they think about this device as like, oh, it's cool, it's got lenses and it puts content in space, but it's kitted out with all these sensors and cameras. So there's actually a lot of intelligence and awareness about your space. And what can we do with this? Well, an easy example here would be, we can know the walls, table, and ceiling. So here I am just snapping some virtual photos onto my wall. I'll snap it onto the desk, pull it up, and there's a little stick, snap it back down. And the next one I'll stick on the ceiling. And of course, this is just a very basic example. You think about what becomes possible when you actually have a digital twin of your space as well. The third reason is, well, think about your digital life for a minute and think about how blurry everything becomes. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we've all had this happen to us where somebody sends you a cool link and, oh, it's like, Josh sent me that thing yesterday. Like, what was it called? And like, in what of five, was it in WhatsApp, or was it on Telegram, or was it in Slack, or was it on an email? I can't remember. And the reason you can't remember is because all of these digital things, all these 50 tabs on my screen, they have zero spatial context. And the beautiful thing about spatial AR is that it is more memorable. It's a more memorable way to interact with computers. Everything can be in its right place because these objects have spatial context. So one example of this is, a lot of folks have heard of the memory palace technique. So those memory experts that can memorize like 10 decks of playing cards in a row, they do this using spatial memory techniques. And this is just one of them. And the way this works is, you think of a place you're very familiar with, and you imagine yourself walking, okay, I'm walking down the street and I'm going to turn into my apartment. And you think of these different sequential stops along the way. So first I'm going to stop by the flowers, then I'm going to look at the doorstep, then I'm going to peek in this little blue curtain, then I go over to where I park my scooter, and so on. In each of these places, you place what you want to remember. And for someone who has a terrible memory, I can tell you, like, this really works, and it's amazing. Why does it work? Because that's how our brains evolved. Our brains are like the original spatial computers. And so when we're creating virtual things that play to those strengths, I think a lot more, and especially these challenges we have with like everything kind of blurring together and being very messy and cluttered in regular digital life, it can be changed. One example of this is just a screenshot on my desk, but you can play with things like, when I touch the left corner of my drawer, like that's where my file folder can open and I can tile through these files, or like I always want the exit button like to the right of my computer. Or we can play with assigning behaviors to real objects in your space. Like I could walk over to the light switch over there and I could touch it, not actually flip the real light, but just touch it. And then that could change the dimming properties in my eyewear. And so on. So you can begin to see how this is just a constrained example, but already I'm up and liberated, moving around in my space. And now that whole flow, like that flow of moving from program to program, file to file, conversation to conversation can be a lot more seamless because we've added that spatial dimension. Speaking of that, there's this kind of tethered feeling you have when you're kind of designing at your workstation. So just think about this constrained feeling, like your head's kind of locked forward. It almost feels like you're chained to your desk. And there's this really unbounded free range quality, I feel anyways, when I'm designing an AR, that just changes everything about how it feels to do this work. Because you're up and moving around, you're getting an embodied sense of what you're working on. But most importantly, there are a lot of studies that point to this, we're just more creative when we're up and moving around. So there's something that's unlocked through moving and walking and hiking. You think about all the ideas that you have when like you're on something as simple as just a walk. That is just something that's innately part of being a human being. And so here, when you have this free range way of designing, what does that unlock? Well, it definitely means certain things for how you design. So like content or UI, is it going to be world relative, like the image on the left? Or is it going to be body relative and follow you and billboard you as you move around? Like these are important decisions. It could be headlocked. So at moments it could choose to follow your head and your gaze, or it could be locked to your hand or your controller. So there's, this unbounded nature means we have a lot more options at our disposal for how we design for this sort of situation. And finally, if you think about VR, again, it's like having a digital blindfold on. It closes us off from the real world, the space we're in, and the people that are in there with us. And that's why I like working in AR so much, is because there's the sense of being grounded. I'm still in this place. I'm still inhabiting this place, and I'm still working with all these people who are here with me. And that's something that I haven't been able to experience in VR. Just to give you an example of the type of thing that's possible, this is a workshop from our team we held last year in LA. And I think there's like something like 30 or 40 people in this shared session. And you'll have to forgive this video because I shot it with my phone, like looking through the device as I was walking around, because we didn't have spectator enabled just yet. But you can kind of see everyone's drawing. I forget what the prompt here was for the session, but everyone's drawing some idea, and you're able to see what everyone else is drawing, and you can walk around. I can draw on what Andre's drawing, and he can come over, and Rebecca's maybe going to come over here and draw on what I'm drawing. And that's not possible. That, in other ways of doing this. And there is this, it's like an intangible, like very nuanced thing, but it just feels more like what it feels like to just be in a room with people working the way that we used to without technology. So in a weird way, designing stuff for Magic Leap, but also using Magic Leap as a tool to do the design has been an interesting experience. And it's in the course of using it for our work, I actually noticed a few other things. And I noticed this both solo and in groups. And it's that in a weird way, this was like making things possible that weren't possible before. And sometimes it felt like we had superhuman powers or abilities. And if you think about, like superpowers, those are, there's like a rich kind of legacy in our cultural landscape, our cultural media landscape of these superpowers, and one of them is super strength. And so, like, you know, a lot of superheroes are really strong, and so it's like, okay, well, in AR, like, I can actually pick up a skyscraper. Who knows how much that thing weighs, and I can actually move it around on the landscape, on the skyline, and find just the right orientation. There's an app called Geopogo. Super speed is another one, and especially in our, you know, modern work culture, like everyone wants to do things faster, more efficient. Well, in AR, I'm a speed demon. I mean, I would win virtually any prototyping race against anyone who's building a prototype with physical materials. And so you just think about the time and the cost savings of that. One of my favorites, telekinesis. This is the power to move objects with your mind. So in AR, I too can be just like 11. Here I am rearranging furniture in my living room, maybe going to come up with a new layout. I just, you know, gesture to something, kind of pull it on over. X-ray vision, the power to see inside or through walls. This is an app called Argyle. You know, you can see like the electrical, the HVAC, the plumbing. So imagine, like, if you're an interior designer doing a refit of an existing space, like you can see the hidden infrastructure that you need to work within. Maybe my favorite is telepathy, the power to communicate both thoughts and emotions to somebody else. So kind of back to that, help somebody else see what you see and feel what you feel. Well, sometimes when we're doing an immersive presentation, it actually feels that way, because unlike some of the other artifacts that we use to communicate our ideas, this really can feel like the person I'm talking to can see exactly what's in my head, and they can see how it feels. They don't have to trust me anymore. They can see it for themselves. So talked about some principles of the shift from spatial, from screens to spatial, and talked about some of the superpower-like abilities that this might enable. And we've been kind of folding these up, trying to consider these as we've been developing this application called Magic Leap Workshop. And we wanted to make something that was not like a specific tool for any one type of spatial designer, but something that allowed all kinds of spatial designers to get their toe in the water with AR and just to see how this might change their process. So how would this work for architects? How would it work for interior designers, landscape designers, exhibit designers, industrial, but even like unusual suspects, like people who design theater and performance. Like, think about how this could be used to block out space. And think about people on the build side, developers and fabricators. How's this going to help them? So when we had a beta version of this application, I called up my friend David Schwartz and I said, like, hey, David, we made this thing. I think it might be useful for what you guys do. Would you want to partner with us and pilot this out, give us some feedback, and just like, let's see where this thing goes? Fortunately, he said yes. And what unfolded was a really amazing partnership. And we learned a lot of things. And so I'm gonna play a short version of the video where you can kind of see just some of the types of things that we explored. And I'll talk over it, there's no sound. So in the conceptual phase, the ideation phase, like 3D whiteboard, right? Virtual prototyping, iterating on shapes, even motion. How's motion going to look at scale? Like everything from like dollhouse view to like, you know, room scale view of some of these design ideas. Seeing how this installation fits into the broader space. My favorite part, we rented a giant warehouse and we did an at-scale design review with their clients. And this blew me away, because it was like, you know, this whole thing was like a bit of nostalgia for me. Seeing David walk his clients through, and Eric and the rest of the team, it was really fantastic, because my hypothesis about what this thing could do and what this could unlock, like I felt like I was right about it. We were right about it. I saw the dynamic interplay, that same interplay between the team and the clients, that just made this kind of intangible, unspeakable thing possible, invited the clients into the design process and allowed them to see these design ideas from angles and perspectives that they otherwise never would have been able to. So anyhow, it was a really illuminating experience. And, fortunately, I have a little surprise for you guys because David Schwartz is on the call here. And I'm going to stop sharing because I thought it would be way more interesting for you to hear from him what this experience was like, and maybe take you guys through some of the behind the scenes process stuff of what it was like to integrate AR into their workflow.
Hey, that was an awesome reveal. Thanks. I'm hoping to give a little bit of like first person storytelling around what it was like to kind of be the guinea pigs around this with Joel and speak really authentically about what happened and kind of how it made me feel, particularly as a business leader, but also just working with my teams and the client. So I'm going to rip through this and then we're going to have some time to discuss. Cool. So let me share. So picking up where Joel left off, see that? Good.
Yeah, we got it.
Thumbs up. Cool. So who am I? I run a company called Hush, but more importantly, it's like, what's my role there? And I'm just on the edge of creative leadership, strategic leadership, and like helping the team to really like align. So working with our team internally. But I spend a lot of time, externally facing too, working with people who generally are not, designers, are not trained creatives and have to interpret their goals and desires. And so I'm at this edge and border. And I think that's really, really relevant for this particular type of collaboration and development and design. And you'll see how that kind of comes to life. So a few big ideas, which Joel has already done a great job of setting up much better than I am, but really to like zoom in on this is a few things. So the first one is finding what I think is kind of a missing link in visualization as a design firm. You're always struggling with that. I'm sure anyone on this call who's doing design and experiential work, you're asking yourself to render or not to render. It's like every project. It's like, what do we do? How do we start getting this idea we have in our head onto paper? But if we go too fast, too soon, we're going to overpromise, or we're going to get people caught into like a discussion about something that's we're not ready for. Yet, if we go little and gestural and sketchy and kind of incomplete, especially for some clients who really need to see specificity in order to give feedback and feel confident about it, you're not there yet and they can't engage. So you're always stuck. The industry's been around forever. We have all these methods to go from nothing to something incredibly high fidelity. And I think, it's like we're on this curve. And so, we can sketch and we can ideate, and it can be low fidelity and allows a lot of people to get into it. And it's kind of throwaway. So you're not taking anything too preciously. Then you give it some fidelity and people start to feel like there's less choice. And then you get higher and higher fidelity and more focused, and it's more towards execution. And then you're doing all these things like fly-throughs and detailing and stuff, right? But what I kind of realized in retrospect, I didn't realize it in the moment, I'll tell you. But in retrospect, what a lot of we were doing, and obviously what Magic Leap and Workshop does has a lot more capabilities than this, but this sheer idea of where it sits in this grid between super high fidelity, like photorealistic perfection, low fidelity sketch, where you are in this ideation to execution process is really interesting. It's the only collaborative stage, right? If you think about all the other things I showed you, it's like pretty much like one talented artist making something. But as Joel said and shown, even better than this little GIF, this is a moment where it galvanizes all these interests, but it still feels incredibly flexible, but you learn a lot. So that's the first one. The second one is, we're all here, we're all part of some kind of creative industry, and we all probably share, one of Joel's superpowers. We can kind of visualize things before they are real, and we can do that in our head. And I think we shouldn't take that for granted. Many people can't do that. It's maybe not their special superpower, which is okay. They have other superpowers. But there's a lot of gap between what a creative team is thinking and feeling and intuiting and just vibing on, and what the entire stakeholder set around them, incredibly complex stakeholders from CFOs to business leaders to whoever, it's just, there's a huge gap, and somewhere in between is reality. And so what we're really doing is just mushing our perceptions and our abilities to perceive the future, the unseen, together, and getting a little bit closer to a shared reality. And I can tell you, shared reality helps a hell of a lot. Gets people excited. They feel like they're co-creating. They can feel comfortable making decisions faster. They've put money down behind those decisions, all the things you need to create forward momentum on a creative project. So a couple of unique ways I think it does that is, especially with what Joel was talking about with this one-to-one scale kind of prototyping we were doing, is, it's very hard. It's even a dollhouse view, people can kind of see it, we've all looked at a little model, we've all looked at an IKEA furniture layout, we've all looked at a train set. But things that are bigger than kind of your imagination, or at a scale that's uncomfortable, or it's kind of hard to be lived, the perspectives really make a difference. And then understanding how big something really is, how visible something really is important. And then the last part is sustainable workflows. And when I did my Future Spaces talk, I talked a lot about sustainability as part of a technologically enabled experience design firm, and how they're kind of at odds with each other, but we got to work to improve what we're doing. And I think something really interesting happened when we put the mixed reality process into our process. And anyone who makes things in the real world knows you have to go through these stages. And sometimes the budget allows and time allows to do more or less, or bigger or smaller, or higher or less fidelity. But all of it's costing time, all of it's costing personal and real carbon energy, and all sorts of material waste. And so, we all do this. We build little models, make material samples, we do fab, mock-ups, prototypes, half scale, quarter scale, 10th scale. We make a piece of something. Maybe we build a full 1-to-1 scale where you can walk the whole thing foot to foot and really evaluate. But this stuff starts getting real expensive. And I don't mean just dollar expensive. I mean, it ends up in a landfill. So, if you're looking at like typical, and this is very basic, but typical architectural timeline, which we're sort of all beholden to at a certain scale, you do all these things, and again, some more, some less, but I think what we've done with Magically is having meaningful impact right here. Like, I watched our client not need some of these things that we were typically ready to offer at milestones. And it's not that they're not important, and they do very different things sometimes, but I saw real gains. And we went from, at a certain point, a setup where we have to spend material, technological, energy, and time costs at scale, to a moment where I had the client make all the decisions they would have made at a fabricator's shop, and only spending time cost, which is pretty much part and parcel to like the service industry. So time is always going to be there. But it's a big deal. And maybe that was $100,000 cost, but imagine a project that's urban scale development happening over 3, 5, 10 years, and how you can do this. I mean, the zeros add up and the carbon impacts add up. So that's important. So all of this, Joel set up with that little sizzle video. That's a nice tidy case study of what it is. But the project is very unique, and it lent itself to Magically as part of the process in a really specific way. So Joel came to us. We were already engaged with Devco, which was our client, a real estate firm, and they are game. But Devco is a $2 billion nonprofit real estate company in charge of the wants and dreams and hopes for all these public and private entities, including Johnson & Johnson and Noki Bella. So you can imagine, in terms of stakeholder alignment, this is a perfect example to be like, how do you get all these disparate people and minds and interests aligned? And it was great. So this is a project. It's happening in New Jersey, in New Brunswick, where Rutgers is headquartered. kind of the, near the home of the original innovation and Edison and everything. And so the whole point was really about placemaking. I won't go into it in super detail, but we came up with a simple idea. It's called the Helix. The whole site is called the Helix. And we didn't have to jump too far to really think about what like DNA means and how it innovates and mutates and changes and advances to make that a sort of visual metaphor. And we came up with like a through line of that sketch that could be physical, physical, purely digital, all these things. In the end, this is kind of what we've been working on. A big move outside. These are 30, 40-foot high sculptural forms, light enabled. There's a thing in the lobby which galvanizes everyone around something. And so I'll get to why this is really mixed reality relevant in a second, but just so outside, you got a lot of scale, you got a lot of perspective shifts, you got a lot of money going into building these things. So there's a lot of like alignment. Is this worth the effort? Is this going to make place? Is this going to be a placemaking device that is going to have impact? I think that's the big question at hand. Secondly, in the lobby, pretty cool. This is, we took that DNA strand and instead made it cut through the floor. So like 60 feet of DNA, sliced out of the floor that then goes up into the building, literally and conceptually. But what's cool about it is the whole thing is going to be dynamic type in one mode that then becomes live AI visuals. And why that's cool is because we have research papers from the life sciences, businesses and institutions on the campus, and we're accessing those white papers as pure data. Those white papers are going to become textual insights. Those insights are going to become prompts. Those prompts become prompts for AI visualization. So essentially you have an art piece, an artwork that's constantly evolving based on the research being done in the campus. Everyone on this Zoom probably knows what I just said, but trust me, this was new ideas for the client. So again, a big cognitive gap. And then there's all sorts of fun interactive paradigms and modalities for group and singular and interactions and things and Easter eggs. And so again, another layer of like invisible things that are normal for us to talk about and think about, but not normal for the stakeholders. So in the end, it's a complicated enough project where maybe some of the original tools that we have in our design process wasn't going to do the job, wasn't going to get people galvanized and aligned. And so what really happened was we pretty much pushed as much as we could to get everyone aligned using what Magic Leap and Workshop has to offer. So the first was like the power of one-to-one scale. You saw this. I mean, we rented this big warehouse in the Navy Yard where we're based, and we were able to walk the site step for step. It was, this is how long it's going to take you to walk this park site at the entrance. And let's do it together and walk with the client one-to-one while looking up at structures that were changing in their perspective, changing in their form visually. And we did adjustments in real time. So it was amazing. I mean, we watched them fall in love, believe in, but also give critical feedback on all of this because of the one-to-one scaleness of it. And we did furniture studies, we did dollhouse studies, it was all there. But that was pretty powerful. And then the perspective piece was like, we could pick up these large sculptural elements and hold them in the palm of our hand, and we could observe them, much like I'm observing, this glasses case in front of me. And it gave us an intimacy with the details that you simply can't reach through the two-dimensional screen to feel in traditional visualization and design processes. And then lastly, this is, I think, the most important one. And I'll spend an extra 60 seconds on it. I told you we are doing a 60-foot chunk taken out of the ground in the lobby that's submerged by 2 feet under glass. And there's a lot of ADA, there's a lot of human factors, behavioral psych, feelings of clarity, know where to go, wayfinding, a little bit of excitement, a lot of fear. We had a whole suite of people. We really looked at this through. And what came to be of interest was it's a really cool creative idea, but is it gonna apply and inspire and be a positive effect on most people? And it was a question we had to ask as just good designers, but also as a designers of folks of something that was pretty aggressive, I would say, pretty challenging. And so what Magic Leap was able to do with our clients was give them a lot of confidence in certain aspects of this and also help us shore up our ability to design for a much broader set of people. And we did that by learning about perspective shift. It was quite real to me and them what it would feel like to walk towards and ultimately over this kind of thing. And I'm telling you that, you can believe me or not, but it was probably the closest I'd ever gone to understanding what it might feel like. And the second part was, I said it's all dynamic typography in one of the modes. So now we got big type over a large square footage moving at different rates with contrast values that we have to think about through material. So a lot of complexity again. So, we got to look at what's the scale, what's the motion, what's the speed, what would it be like to walk on type of moving type? Is it legible? Is it distorted? Is it confusing? Are we asking people to look down to look up? Will they even get it? Does it just become texture? A million questions you have by doing, digital things in physical space. But in this particular design concept, you can see how complicated it could be. So we solved a lot of those things through this process. So those are the three core things I think you could focus on by this case study. And I gotta say, now it's involved in all sorts of other projects, and we're moving into much deeper, crazier build phases of the project, and we continue to work on it through the Magic Leap process to inform it. And our client's absolutely in love with it. So it really bonds. It's quite a bonding agent as well. So that's it. I'll stop sharing. Thanks.
All right. That was awesome. All right. I love the cameo appearance. This is excellent. Okay, let's open up for your questions, guys. Feel free to put the questions in the chat. You can ask it yourself, or I can ask for you, whatever you prefer. So there was actually a question that Sophie had. Sophie, do you want to ask it? Do you want me to ask it for you? Okay. All right, I'll ask. So she had a question. This was, during the course of the presentation, if AR is the best use case, and whether you guys explored VR, and how did you precisely align the holograms with a complex 3D physical space?
Is that a question for David or?
Either way, I guess that kind of came up in David's part. So, Dave, you want to talk about where like why you feel like AR might have been a better fit for this than in a full VR space?
I can answer, but I know Joel has an amazing answer to this because I've heard it before. So he's going to say it, and
Let's
I'll
do
add
it.
if there's anything that he's missing, I'll add.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, to me, and this is just me, I think VR is a solo thing. And everything that we just showed is all about us, we together. It's not the same in VR. It's just not. Like, you are closed off. Your experience of the world is mediated by a video screen. And so I think for two things, when it's a use case where you need to really be with other people for real, and when you need mobility, you need to move around, you need true AR. So
I believe
That's it. Anything that I was saying value prop wise required me to see my clients and see my team, and for our team to see each other and our clients to see us. That's basically everything I said. So to do that cut off from the world, there's some design detailing I probably would have aimed. I mean, we've used VR a million times for things, but it's that doing that while also simultaneously judging interpersonal reactions, interests, and holding a conversation, which, as you know, is half the process.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting because I have the Apple Vision Pro, and it is it does sort of have that sort of VR AR thing. But I think just even at the price point, there's so few people that can afford them, to actually have like several in a space to be able to like actually experience something together. And I think a lot of what you guys are pointing to is like sort of the magic of doing this stuff in a group, and as part of and actually as a part of your creative process. I think that's pretty profound. Francesca, you had a question?
Yeah, it was just out of curiosity to understand whether Hey Hush is primarily using AR as a tool to design like interactive digital objects within physical spaces. I'm just going back to Joel, your original list of like who you were kind of considering in terms of like architects. And sorry, I've worked with engineers and I work with architects as a strategic designer. So we're doing a lot of work in higher education to create new building typologies and really focus on what are the outcomes that we're designing for in terms of experiences. So just curious, like, yeah, like how are you primarily using it? I could definitely see the benefit for clients in terms of helping them to experience some of the decisions, potential options.
Yeah, as a firm, Francesca, I mean, we're a design firm, so we design things that exist in the real world. Some of those things in the real world spaces have digital elements within them, be it content or lighting or sound or sculpture but for us, we're not using Magic Leap to design end state augmented reality objects. We're using it as a means to a physical end, to an IRL end. We're just helping our clients and team get to better outcomes faster together, but the outcomes ultimately are in the real world. That makes sense?
Cool. It's also interesting because when you talk about the waste and the amount of material that gets produced in our normal sort of process, because I think a lot of us who do experience design, we do like body storming, we build things at scale. There's a lot of cardboard and wood and stuff like that that happens to replicate that one-to-one scale. And like this, this is actually in some ways very, very efficient. All right, that's not a question. Jeremy, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, my camera's on. I was just wondering, can you talk a little bit about the process of going from like a 3D model, like something that David, you created in a 3D rendering or something, and then bringing it into Magic Leap? How does that work?
Joel, talk about the workflow.
Yeah,
can-
yeah.
I
Okay,
can-
so this is this is a big one because if you remember that slide I shared that had different circles for all the different types of spatial design practitioners, we wanted to make this an entry experience for. And if you think about the file types that like an industrial designer would use, like our team is what do they want? Step files. Then the architects want something else, and so everyone has their different like file formats. And so we're at an earlier phase where it's a lot of work to support these new file types. And so I am not the best technical person to speak to the pipeline, but I do know that there are some flows that work better than others. And if anyone's interested in actually trying this out, I would be happy to share some documentation around the steps that tend to work best. But yeah, absolutely, there is an optimization process. Like there is unless you're doing remote rendering, the compute is there's a limitation. So depending on how big the models are, how many polygons, all this stuff, like the textures and the lighting, like there are different things you can do to make the artifacts that you've designed off device show up as good as possible on device. And then there's the whole, designing things from scratch on device, which also, we're in the early phases, but I would say that it's really good at kind of the rough conceptual phases where, you need to block space out. You need to do some like lo-fi prototyping. Like it's really good for that. So I think there is this kind of back and forth flow that, doing some things in device, doing some things on your regular workstation, and then importing things back and forth to kind of pick up from where you left off. Sorry, I know that wasn't a direct technical answer for how to, but.
No, that's all right. Thank you. I'll look a little bit more into it about that workflow. Thanks.
I can say on the learning curve side from 0 to, I mean, we would worked with Magic Leap before, but with this application from 0 to 10, I think our designers and our technical team found it pretty interesting. We were also in like beta with Joel and his team, so we were going back and forth on how to optimize, and they improved even the application based on some of our feedback. So it was really cool, but it's actually quite once you get it, it's like pretty slick. And it doesn't mean that you have to really come out of your normal design process. You're kind of just siphoning off assets in just a particular format method. And it's quite simple. And then it becomes actually a web interface that gives you like a palette of assets, 3D and 2D, that are existing that become part of the session. So that was my like simplified version, but it's a pretty nice workflow.
All right, great.
That's fantastic.
So, oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, Julie had a question, and Joel, this is the question you said I wasn't allowed to ask. Uh, but we'll like we'll talk around it a little bit. But the news of Google working with Magically, whether there was she was wondering whether it would affect the regular sort of XR consumer, and that whether these ML devices might be more affordable and widely available. You don't have to speak specifically, but just what do you think?
Yeah, I would love to opine, but I'm gonna abstain. I'm
Okay, fair. All
auspicious
right.
timing for this announcement, but yeah, we'll keep it focused on the other topic at hand. Yeah.
But I would imagine, we all think that there is a future for this, for creators to be using this for, we all imagine that in several years, more of us will have these devices, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Okay, let's see. We got 3 minutes left. Simon has a question. Oh, wait. All right, should I ask for you? Okay, I'll do it. Okay, please ask more. Have you noticed a different acceptance level or thought process in the designers using this at the start and at the end? Designers are used to building in 3D, but does not this shift to connecting and ideating in 3D? I'm certainly seeing this with 3D printing, manufacturing. New graduates can think in 3D with freedom. Experienced engineers are restricted in their thinking by traditional manufacturing methods. All right, do you get that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So what this brings up for me is like how the tools influence and shape the way we think. And I would say absolutely they do. And I think that there are limitations. That's kind of what I was getting at in some of the talk here, is that there are inherent limitations from designing 3D things on 2D screens. It's representations of 3D things. And everything changes when you start designing natively. And so, I still think we're very early. Like, I don't know if I've seen enough people go through this to like be able to speak intelligently about any sort of quantitative trends or patterns. But like what I have seen just with our own internal teams and with David's team has been really reassuring and promising about the potential of where we could head, because it makes it's just more natural to how your brain wants to work and think. And because of that very simple fact, I think that the types of things that we're capable of producing on our own and together are going to change dramatically.
All right, awesome. So I think we're right about at time. Joel, David, do you have any sort of like sign-offs for this community? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, no, just a big thank you, Josh, for having me, and David for joining, and for everyone who showed up. Like, Josh, the Future Spaces, this series you put together is awesome. I was telling Josh before the call, like I actually have it blocked off on my calendar. I'm always trying to make it. Inevitably, meetings crop up, but I think you've done such a great job with curating the series, and it's really nice to come together as a community and talk about stuff. So I really appreciate that, and yeah, I thank everyone for showing up today and for all the great questions.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, +1. I mean, thanks for inviting me back. I usually don't get invited back anywhere twice. Great.
You guys are always invited. Well, and then Joel, David, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. Come back next week. We'll be talking about camp. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, shoot me an email and I will ask Joel and David. We'll try to get those answers out to you. We can always follow up with more specific things too. So again, thanks everybody for being here. Have a lovely weekend. All right, have a good one. Talk to y'all. See you. Bye.
Bye, Alan. Thank you.